Some mistakes begin so quietly that by the time you realize you're on the path to disaster, it's already too late. For Rebecca Lawson, that path began in the cold corridors of Willowbrook County Jail, at a moment she never expected. The 28-year-old deputy sheriff had been serving this small Georgia town for 5 years. Everyone knew her, respected her. She had a spotless record, a stable marriage, and a bright future ahead. Until that day. Have you ever felt an irresistible pull toward something forbidden? That pull becomes so strong that you forget your logic, your values, even who you are. Rebecca was about to experience exactly that, though she didn't know it yet. On the morning of March 15th, 2019, Rebecca started her shift as usual. Her uniform was flawless, her badge gleaming, her service weapon secure in its holster. Mark, her husband, had left early for the construction site again. Lately, there had been a distance between them. In their 3rd year of marriage, it seemed they had nothing left to talk about. Rebecca tried not to think about it. She had work to do, responsibilities to fulfill. Willowbrook County Jail was a medium security facility housing about 200 inmates. Rebecca's duties included supervising inmate transfers, conducting cell inspections, and maintaining security. It was routine work, predictable and safe, or so she thought. That morning, Sheriff Tom Bradley called her into his office. The old man had been like a father figure to her since she joined the force. His weathered face showed concern as she sat down. "Rebecca, I need you to take over the morning rounds in Block C," he said, his voice grave. Jake's wife went into labor last night. Block C housed medium-risk inmates, mostly drug offenders and nonviolent criminals awaiting trial or serving short sentences. Rebecca nodded. "No problem, Sheriff. I've got it covered." "There's a new transfer in C-17, Bradley continued, sliding a file across his desk. "Dante Rodriguez, drug trafficking, 8 years, transferred from state because of overcrowding. Keep an eye on him. His file shows he's persuasive." Rebecca glanced at the mugshot. Dark eyes stared back at her, intense even in a photograph. Hispanic male, 32 years old, athletic build. Something about those eyes made her look twice before closing the file. "Persuasive how?" she asked. "He's got a history of manipulating staff at his previous facilities. Nothing actionable, but several warnings. Just maintain professional distance." If only she had truly understood what that warning meant. If only she had recognized the danger in those dark eyes. But hindsight is always perfect, isn't it? Rebecca made her way to Block C, her footsteps echoing in the sterile hallway. The familiar smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with the underlying odor of too many bodies in too small a space. She had walked these halls hundreds of times, but today felt different somehow. Maybe it was the unexpected assignment, or maybe it was something else entirely. The inmates were having breakfast when she arrived. Through the reinforced glass, she could see them hunched over their trays, the same gray slop they served every morning. Most didn't look up as she passed. They knew the routine. But as she approached C-17, she felt eyes on her. Dante Rodriguez was standing by his cell door, not eating. He was taller than his mugshot suggested, maybe 6'2", with the kind of presence that fills a room even when he's standing still. His orange jumpsuit did nothing to diminish the controlled power in his movements as he turned to face her. "You must be the new guard," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that softened the edges of his words. "I haven't seen you on this block before." "Deputy Lawson," Rebecca responded curtly, maintaining eye contact. "And I'm not new. Just covering today." A smile played at the corner of his mouth. Not threatening, not even particularly flirtatious, just knowing somehow. "My mistake, Deputy Lawson." I'm Dante. I know who you are, she said, moving past his cell to continue her rounds, but she could feel his gaze following her. Have a good day, deputy, he called after her. She didn't respond, but something in his tone stuck with her. Not the usual crude comments or hostile silence she got from inmates. There was a strange respectfulness to it, almost. Gentle. The morning rounds continued without incident. Rebecca checked cells, verified head counts, supervised medication distribution, but she found herself hyper-aware each time she passed C-17. Dante never said anything else, just nodded politely when their eyes met. Professional, respectful, entirely appropriate. So why did her pulse quicken each time? Back home that evening, Mark was already on the couch, beer in hand, watching the game. He barely looked up when she entered. "Hey," he grunted. "There's leftover pizza in the fridge." Rebecca stood in the doorway, still in uniform, watching the man she'd married. When had they become strangers living in the same house? When had "I love you" become "there's pizza in the fridge"? "How was your day?" she tried. "Same shit, different day. You?" She thought about mentioning the new assignment, the warning about the manipulative inmate, the strange feeling she'd had all day. Instead, she said, "Same." Mark's attention had already returned to the TV. Rebecca went to shower, letting the hot water wash away the day. But as she closed her eyes, she saw dark eyes staring back at her. She shook her head, angry at herself. She was a professional, a married woman, a deputy sheriff with a spotless record, but loneliness has a way of making you vulnerable to attention, even from the wrong sources. The next morning, Rebecca found herself assigned to Block C again. Jake's wife had complications, Bradley explained. She'd be covering for at least a week. Rebecca nodded, telling herself the slight flutter in her stomach was just coffee on an empty stomach. This time, when she passed C-17, Dante was reading. A worn paperback, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, she noticed. Not what she expected from a drug dealer. "Love in the time of cholera," she found herself saying, breaking her own rule about unnecessary interaction. Dante looked up, genuine surprise flickering across his features. "You've read it?" "College," she admitted. "Literature minor." "A cop with a literature degree," he mused. "That's unexpected." "Deputy," she corrected automatically. "And you're a drug dealer reading magical realism. That's equally unexpected." "Former drug dealer," he said with a wry smile. "Currently, I'm just an inmate trying to pass 8 years without losing my mind." She should have walked away then. Should have maintained that professional distance Bradley had warned her about. Instead, she found herself lingering. "Why Garcia Marquez?" she asked. Dante considered the question, his fingers tracing the book's worn spine. "My mother used to read to me in Spanish when I was young." Garcia Marquez reminds me of her voice. The rhythm of the words, you know? There was a vulnerability in that admission that caught Rebecca off guard. She'd been prepared for manipulation, for smooth talking, for con games. She wasn't prepared for genuine human connection. "She must be proud of you," she said, the sarcasm coming out gentler than intended. "She died before I got arrested," Dante replied quietly. "Cancer. At least she never had to see this." He gestured at the cell around him. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said, and meant it. "We all make choices, Deputy Lawson. Some of us just make worse ones than others." Their eyes met through the bars, and for a moment, the barrier between them seemed to dissolve. Then Rebecca's radio crackled to life, breaking the spell. "Lawson, need you in processing," Turner's voice announced. "On my way," she responded, already moving. She didn't look back. but she could feel Dante watching her leave. That night, Mark didn't come home until after midnight, stumbling in drunk from another night with his buddies. Rebecca pretended to be asleep as he collapsed into bed, reeking of beer and cigarettes. She stared at the ceiling in the darkness, wondering when her life had become so empty that a brief conversation with an inmate was the highlight of her day. The week continued in the same pattern. Each day, Rebecca would pause at C-17. Each day, their conversations grew a little longer, a little deeper. Dante told her about growing up in East LA, about his scholarship to USC that he lost when his father got sick and he needed quick money. Rebecca found herself sharing too, about her small-town childhood, her dreams of making detective, the way her marriage was slowly suffocating her. "Why do you stay?" Dante asked one morning, after she'd admitted that Mark hadn't really talked to her in months. "It's complicated," she said, the standard response of everyone in a failing marriage. "Is it, though?" Dante challenged gently. "Or is it just scary to admit it's over?" She didn't answer, couldn't answer. Because he was right, and that terrified her. By Friday, Rebecca was looking forward to her rounds in a way that should have been a warning sign. She'd started wearing perfume again, told herself it was just to feel more feminine, more human in the harsh environment of the jail. She'd styled her hair instead of pulling it back in the regulation bun. Small things. Harmless things. Except they weren't harmless at all. "You look different today," Dante observed as she approached his cell. "Do I? Happier, maybe. More alive." She felt the blush creeping up her neck and hated herself for it. "It's Friday. Everyone's happier on Friday. Even inmates?" he asked with that half-smile that made her stomach flutter. "Especially inmates. Weekend means visitors." "Not for me," he said. "No one left to visit." The sadness in his voice was so genuine it made her chest ache. Without thinking, she reached through the bars, her hand briefly covering his where it rested on the crossbar. The touch lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it sent electricity through her entire body. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was apologizing for his loneliness or for touching him. "Don't be," Dante replied, his voice rough. "It's the first human contact I've had in months that wasn't violent." Rebecca pulled her hand back as if burned, the weight of what she'd done crashing over her. She'd touched an inmate, initiated physical contact. It was a violation of every protocol, every rule, every ethical boundary of her profession. "I have to go," she said abruptly, turning away. "Rebecca," he called after her, using her first name for the first time. She stopped, but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I know you were just being kind." She walked away without responding, her hand still tingling from the contact. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection. What was she doing? This wasn't her. She didn't break rules, she didn't cross lines. But loneliness and attraction make a dangerous combination, especially when someone sees you, really sees you, for the first time in years. That weekend was torture. Mark spent Saturday at his buddy's house watching football, came home drunk, and passed out on the couch. Sunday, he went fishing before dawn and didn't return until after dark. Rebecca spent 2 days alone in her own home, her thoughts constantly drifting to a pair of dark eyes and a gentle voice that made her feel visible again. She tried to convince herself it was nothing, just compassion for someone who was alone, just basic human kindness. But late at night, when Mark's snores filled the bedroom, she found herself replaying every conversation, every look, every moment that had passed between them. Monday morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Rebecca dressed carefully, professional. Nothing special, she told herself, even as she applied lipstick for the first time in months. When Bradley told her Jake would be out for another 2 weeks, his wife had developed complications. She had to work to keep the relief off her face. But when she reached Block C, C-17 was empty. Panic flared in her chest, completely disproportionate to the situation. She grabbed Turner as he passed. "Where's Rodriguez?" "Medical," Turner replied. "Got jumped in the yard yesterday. Pretty bad from what I heard." Rebecca's professional mask slipped for just a moment, concern flooding her features. Turner noticed. "You okay, Lawson?" "Fine," she said quickly. We're supposed to prevent that kind of thing." Turner shrugged. "Can't watch everyone all the time. Besides, Rodriguez probably had it coming. Drug dealers usually do." Rebecca wanted to argue, wanted to defend Dante, but caught herself. What was she doing? Why did she care so much about an inmate who'd been beaten? She went through her rounds mechanically, her mind elsewhere. During her break, she found herself walking toward the medical wing. Just checking on an incident in her block, she told herself. Part of her duties. Dr. Jane Olson was updating charts when Rebecca entered. They'd known each other for years, had grabbed drinks together a few times. "Hey, Rebecca, what brings you to my domain? Heard one of the inmates from my block was brought in yesterday. Rodriguez?" Jane's expression darkened. "Yeah, bad one. 3 guys cornered him in the yard. Broken ribs, concussion, lots of bruising. He'll live, but he's going to be here for a few days." "Can I see him?" The words were out before Rebecca could stop them. Jane raised an eyebrow. "Why?" I've been doing rounds on his block. Just want to make sure he's okay. For my report." It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. But Jane just shrugged and pointed down the hall. "Room 3, he's conscious but on pain meds, so he might be a little out of it." Rebecca's feet carried her down the hall before her brain could talk her out of it. She knocked softly on the doorframe before entering. Dante was propped up in bed, his face a mess of bruises and cuts. His left eye was swollen shut, his lip split. But when he saw her with his good eye, he tried to smile. "Deputy Lawson, this is unexpected." She moved closer, her professional composure cracking at the sight of his injuries. "Jesus, Dante, what happened?" "Disagreement about territory I no longer control," he said, his voice slightly slurred from the medication. "Apparently, some people have long memories." "Who did this?" "Doesn't matter." "It does matter. You need to file a report, get them transferred to isolation." "Rebecca," he interrupted gently. "Let it go. This is prison. These things happen." She found herself sitting in the chair beside his bed without remembering the decision to do so. "This shouldn't happen. You're supposed to be safe here." Dante's good eye studied her with an intensity that made her shift in her seat. "Why do you care what happens to me?" The question hung in the air between them. She should have said it was her job, her duty, her professional responsibility. Instead, she found herself speaking the truth. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just do." His hand moved across the blanket, stopping just short of hers, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat from his skin. "You should stay away from me," he said quietly. "I'm no good for you." "I know," she replied, but didn't move. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken things filling the room. Then, footsteps in the hallway broke the spell and Rebecca jumped up. "I should go." "Rebecca," Dante called as she reached the door. "Thank you for checking on me, for caring." She nodded without turning around and fled the medical wing, her heart racing like she'd run a marathon. This was getting out of control. She was getting out of control. That night, she lay beside Mark's sleeping form and tried to convince herself to request a transfer to a different block, to put distance between herself and temptation, to save her career, her marriage, her life as she knew it. But she knew she wouldn't, because for the first time in years she felt alive. And that feeling was more addictive than any drug Dante had ever sold. When Dante returned to Block C after 5 days in medical, Rebecca had to physically stop herself from rushing to his cell. She waited until her official rounds, maintaining the facade of professionalism even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The bruises had faded to yellow-green patches across his face, but he moved carefully, favoring his left side where the ribs were still healing. "Welcome back," she said, keeping her voice neutral as other inmates watched. "Good to be back, Deputy," he replied, but his eyes said so much more. Have you ever stood at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one more step would send you plummeting, but feeling the irresistible pull to jump anyway? That's where Rebecca stood now, teetering on the edge of something that would destroy everything she'd built. Later, during the quiet hour, when most inmates napped or read, she returned to C-17. This time, she had a book with her. 100 Years of Solitude, she said, sliding it through the bars. Thought you might want something new. Dante's fingers brushed hers as he took the book, and this time neither of them pulled away immediately. The touch lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. An eternity in a place where every second was monitored, recorded, observed. "Thank you," he said softly, his thumb tracing the cover. "No one's given me a gift in I can't remember how long." "It's not a gift," Rebecca said quickly, glancing around nervously. "It's just, inmates are allowed books, from the library." "This isn't from the library," Dante observed, noting the personal inscription on the inside cover. "This is yours." She'd forgotten about the inscription. Her college professor had written it years ago. To Rebecca, "May you always find magic in the real." Now those words felt like a prophecy, or maybe a curse. "Keep it," she said. "I've read it enough times." Their conversations evolved after that. During her rounds, they spoke in code, professional exchanges that meant nothing to anyone listening but everything to them. A simple, "How are you today, Rodriguez?" became loaded with concern and care. His "Fine, Deputy Lawson" carried reassurances meant only for her. But it was during the quiet hours that the real conversations happened. Rebecca started timing her paperwork to coincide with these lulls, positioning herself where she could see C-17 while appearing to work. They talked through the bars in hushed tones about books, about dreams, about the roads that had led them to this moment. "Tell me about before," Dante asked one afternoon. "Before Mark, before this job, who were you?" Rebecca thought about it, realizing she'd almost forgotten that girl. "I was going to be a writer," she admitted. "Journalism, maybe novels. I had all these dreams about traveling the world, telling important stories. What happened?" "Life," she said simply. "Dad got sick, needed help with medical bills. The sheriff's department was hiring, had good benefits. It was supposed to be temporary. Nothing's more permanent than a temporary solution," Dante observed. "What about you? Who were you before all this?" His smile was sad. "Would you believe I was pre-med? Really? 3 years at USC. I was going to be a surgeon, had the grades, the dedication. Then my father's construction business went under. He'd borrowed from the wrong people to keep it afloat, when he couldn't pay." Dante shrugged. Someone had to take care of it. "And once you start moving product for those kinds of people, they don't let you stop." "You could have gone to the police." "Could I?" "They threatened my little sister, my mother. By the time I wanted out, I was in too deep. The FBI raid was almost a relief. Rebecca found herself reaching through the bars again, her hand covering his. This time, she didn't pull away. Neither did he. 8 years seems like forever, he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. But maybe it's a chance to figure out who I am without all that weight. Maybe, she agreed, though they both knew 8 years was an eternity in a place like this. People didn't usually come out of long sentences the same as they went in. The moment stretched between them, dangerous and perfect. Then footsteps echoed down the corridor, and Rebecca yanked her hand back, returning to her paperwork as Officer Turner rounded the corner. "Lawson, sheriff wants to see you." Her blood ran cold. Had someone seen? Reported her? She stood on unsteady legs, avoiding Dante's eyes as she followed Turner. But Sheriff Bradley just wanted to discuss scheduling. Jake would be back next week, he explained. Rebecca would return to her regular rotation. She nodded, smiled, said all the right things, even as her heart sank. No more Block C, no more quiet conversations through bars, no more Dante. That night, she told Mark she was going to book club. There was no book club. Instead, she sat in her car in the parking lot of a closed grocery store and cried. When had she become this person? When had an inmate become the highlight of her days? Her phone buzzed. Mark, asking her to pick up beer on the way home. Not, "I love you," not, "I miss you," just, "get beer." She deleted the message without responding. The next morning, she made a decision that would change everything. During shift change, when the camera angles created a blind spot near the supply closet, she slipped a cell phone from the contraband locker. It was an old flip phone, scheduled for destruction. No one would miss it. Her hands shook as she concealed it in her uniform. This wasn't just breaking protocol anymore. This was committing a felony. Bringing contraband to an inmate was a crime that could cost her everything. Her job, her freedom, her life as she knew it. But when she slipped it through the bars to Dante during the quiet hour, when she saw the shock and then the understanding dawn in his eyes, she knew she'd already crossed a line there was no coming back from. "Rebecca, I can't. My number's programmed in," she whispered. "Hide it well. Only use it at night, after lights out. The guards don't monitor the cell towers closely between 2 and 4 a.m. "Why?" he asked, though his fingers had already closed around the phone. "Because I'm being moved to different blocks next week. Because I need to hear your voice. Because..." She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say the words that would make this real. "Rebecca," he said. And the way he said her name made her knees weak. "This is dangerous. I know. For you, more than me. I know. I'm not worth it." She met his eyes through the bars. "That's not your decision to make." That night, at 2:17 a.m., her phone rang. She'd been lying awake, Mark snoring beside her, waiting. She slipped out of bed and into the bathroom, her heart racing. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," Dante replied. And just hearing his voice without the barrier of bars between them made her skin tingle. "I can't believe you did this. Neither can I. Rebecca, if they find out, they won't. I'm careful." Famous last words in a place full of cameras and snitches. But he didn't hang up. They talked for an hour, whispers in the darkness about everything and nothing. About the books they'd read, the places they'd never been, the people they might have been in different lives. When she finally had to go, afraid Mark would wake and wonder where she was, saying goodbye felt like tearing off a piece of herself. This became their routine. Every night, sometime between 2 and 4 a.m., he would call. Rebecca became an expert at slipping out of bed without waking Mark, at keeping her voice low enough not to carry through the thin bathroom door. She was exhausted from lack of sleep, but more alive than she'd been in years. During the days, even though she was no longer assigned to Block C, she found excuses to walk by. Just a glimpse of him was enough to sustain her through the tedious hours. They had developed a system. If she tucked her hair behind her left ear, it meant she was thinking of him. If he stood at his cell door during her pass, it meant he'd call that night. 3 weeks into this dangerous dance, everything changed. Rebecca had been feeling off for days, tired beyond the lack of sleep, nauseated in the mornings. She attributed it to stress, to the constant anxiety of living a double life. But when she missed her period, a cold dread settled in her stomach. She bought the pregnancy test at a pharmacy 3 towns over, paying cash, wearing sunglasses like a criminal, which, she supposed, she was now. The 2 pink lines appeared almost immediately, undeniable and terrifying. She was pregnant, with Mark's child, obviously. They'd had sex exactly once in the past month, a drunken encounter after his birthday party. But as she stared at those 2 lines, all she could think about was how she was going to tell Dante. That night, when he called, she couldn't bring herself to say the words. "You sound different," he observed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she lied. "Just tired." "Rebecca." The way he said her name, gentle but firm, broke through her defenses. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, then immediately clarified. "It's Mark's." "It has to be. We haven't. You and I haven't." Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they hadn't done, everything they wanted to do, everything they could never have. "Congratulations," he finally said, but his voice was hollow. "Dante." "This is good," he interrupted. "This is a sign. You should focus on your marriage, on your family. Forget about me." "I can't." "You have to. I love you." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, hanging in the darkness between them like a confession at gunpoint. She'd never said them before, had barely admitted them to herself, but they were true. God help her, they were true. Dante's breath hitched on the other end of the line. "Rebecca, don't. It's true." "It doesn't matter if it's true. I'm in here for 8 more years. You're married, you're pregnant, you're a cop, and I'm an inmate. There's no version of this that ends well. I don't care. You should care. You have everything to lose." "I already feel like I've lost everything," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The only time I feel like myself is when I'm talking to you." "Jesus, Rebecca." His voice broke. "I love you too, but that just makes this worse." They stayed on the line, not speaking, just breathing together across the impossible distance between them. Finally, Dante spoke again. "We have to stop this. I know. I mean it. No more calls. No more walks by my cell. You need to forget I exist. I can't do that. You have to. For the baby, if nothing else." The baby, right, this cluster of cells growing inside her that would tie her to Mark forever, that would make leaving impossible, that would turn her prison into a life sentence. "What if I wasn't pregnant?" she asked suddenly. "What if I left Mark? What if I waited for you? 8 years, Rebecca. You can't wait 8 years. People have waited longer, not for someone like me. I'm a convicted felon. Even when I get out, I'll have nothing. No job prospects, no money, no future. You deserve better. You're better," she insisted. "You're the best thing that's happened to me. We've never even kissed," he pointed out. "Never been on a date. Never done any of the normal things people do when they fall in love. This isn't real, Rebecca. It's just two lonely people finding comfort in an impossible situation. His words stung because part of her feared they were true. Was this love or just desperation? Was Dante really who she thought he was, or had she projected all her needs onto someone safely unattainable? "It feels real," she whispered. "Feelings aren't reality. Reality is you're pregnant with your husband's baby, and I'm doing 8 years for drug trafficking. Reality is if anyone finds out about us, you go to prison too. Is that what you want? To give birth in chains? To have your baby taken away?" The image was sobering. Rebecca touched her still flat stomach, imagining the life growing inside. This baby didn't ask to be conceived in a loveless marriage or born to a mother in love with an inmate. "You're right," she said quietly. "We have to stop. Tomorrow, put in for a transfer. Different shift, different building, whatever it takes, and get rid of the phone." "How? Break it. Flush the pieces. Just get rid of it." "Okay." "Rebecca?" "Yeah?" "In another life, we could have been everything." The line went dead. Rebecca sat on the bathroom floor, clutching the phone, sobbing as quietly as she could manage. In another life. But they only had this one, and in this life she was trapped in a web of her own making. The next morning, she put in for a transfer to the night shift. Bradley approved it immediately, glad to have someone willing to work the unpopular hours. That afternoon, she walked through Block C one last time. Dante was at his cell door, the Garcia Marquez novel in his hands. Their eyes met for a brief moment, saying everything they couldn't voice. Then she walked away, each step feeling like she was leaving pieces of herself behind. That night, there was no call. She destroyed the phone, flushing the SIM card and throwing the pieces in different dumpsters around town. Mark noticed she was quiet at dinner, but didn't ask why. He never asked why. 2 weeks passed. Rebecca worked nights now, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., avoiding Block C entirely. The pregnancy exhaustion combined with the heartbreak left her feeling like a ghost haunting her own life. She went through the motions: work, home, sleep, repeat. Mark was thrilled about the baby when she finally told him, talking about football games and fishing trips, assuming it would be a boy. Rebecca smiled and nodded and felt nothing. Then, one night, everything went wrong. There was a fight in Block B, all hands needed. Rebecca responded, helping to separate 2 inmates who'd fashioned shanks from toothbrushes. In the chaos, she took an elbow to the stomach. Not hard, but enough to double her over. The cramping started an hour later. By the time her shift ended, she was bleeding. She drove herself to the hospital, told them she'd fallen downstairs. The doctor's face was grim as he delivered the news. She'd lost the baby. Rebecca felt relief and guilt in equal measure. Relief that she wasn't tied to Mark forever. Guilt that she was relieved. She called in sick for 3 days, told Mark she had the flu. He brought her soup once, then went back to his life, unaware that their child was gone. On the 4th day, she went back to work. Night shift meant skeleton crew, fewer eyes watching. At 3 a.m., she found herself in Block C. Just to check, she told herself. Just to make sure everything was secure. Dante was awake, sitting on his bunk, reading by the dim cell light. He looked up when he heard the footsteps, his eyes widening when he saw her. She shouldn't be here, they both knew it, but she walked to his cell anyway, her hand reaching through the bars. "Rebecca," he whispered, moving to the door. "What are you doing here?" "I lost the baby," she said quietly. His hand covered hers, warm and solid and real. "I'm sorry." "I'm not," she admitted. "Does that make me a terrible person?" No, it makes you human. They stood there, hands clasped through the bars, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Then Rebecca made a decision that would seal both their fates. "I'm getting you out," she said. "What?" "I'm getting you out. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to find a way." "Rebecca, no, that's insane. Maybe, but I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend to be okay with this life. I can't watch you waste 8 years in here while I waste 8 years out there. You'll throw away everything." "Everything worth keeping is already gone," she said, "except you." Dante pulled her closer to the bars, his forehead resting against hers through the cold metal. "This is crazy. I know. We'll get caught. Maybe. You'll go to prison. At least we'll be in the same place," she said with dark humor. "I can't let you do this. You can't stop me." And in that moment, in the dim light of Block C with the world asleep around them, the plan began to form. It would take months of preparation, careful planning, and more courage than either of them knew they possessed. But the decision was made. Rebecca Lawson, deputy sheriff, was going to break Dante Rodriguez out of prison, or die trying. Planning a prison break isn't like what you see in movies. There's no digging tunnels with spoons or elaborate schemes involving helicopters. Real escape plans are built on routine, patience, and the exploitation of human weakness. Rebecca learned this over the 4 months that followed her promise to Dante. Have you ever kept a secret so dangerous that it feels like carrying a live grenade in your pocket? Every moment, every interaction, every breath becomes calculated. Rebecca became an expert at living 2 lives, the dedicated deputy sheriff by day, the woman plotting a felony by night. The first thing she did was study. Not just Willowbrook County Jail, but prison breaks across the country. Most successful escapes, she discovered, had one thing in common: inside help. Guards who looked the other way, administrative staff who forgot to file paperwork, medical personnel who falsified records. She had the inside position. Now she needed to figure out how to use it. She started with the shift patterns, memorizing every detail. Tuesday nights had the lightest coverage. Just 3 guards for the entire facility. The cameras in the medical transport bay had been malfunctioning for months. The repair request perpetually delayed due to budget constraints. The fence near the loading dock had a blind spot, invisible from both guard towers after midnight, when the floodlights created deep shadows. "You're different," Mark observed one evening, surprising her as she pored over work schedules she'd brought home. Rebecca's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. More focused, maybe. Like you've got a purpose again." If only he knew what that purpose was. "Just trying to get that promotion," she lied smoothly. "Deputy supervisor position opens up next year." Mark nodded, already losing interest. "Good for you, babe. Maybe we can finally afford that boat." She smiled and nodded, knowing she'd be long gone before any promotion came through. That night, she updated Dante during their 3 a.m. call. They'd resumed them after a week of unbearable silence, unable to stay away from each other. "Mark almost caught me looking at schedules," she whispered. "This is too risky," Dante said for the 100th time. "Rebecca, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. Now listen. Tuesday, November 19th. That's our window. That's 3 months away. We need time to prepare. You need to get transferred to the medical wing that week. Can you fake something?" "I could, but they'll do tests. They'll know I'm not really sick." "Not if the test results say otherwise." Rebecca had been cultivating a relationship with Dr. Olson, bringing her coffee, asking about her kids. Trust was currency, and she was investing carefully. I can handle the medical records." "Jesus, Rebecca, you're talking about falsifying federal documents." "I'm talking about saving us both," she corrected. 8 years, Dante. Do you really want to wait 8 years to start living?" His silence was answer enough. As summer turned to fall, Rebecca's plan solidified. She opened a bank account in a fake name using a stolen ID from the evidence locker, another felony to add to her growing list. She deposited small amounts of cash, never enough to trigger reporting requirements. She bought a used car with cash from a private seller 2 states over, registered to her fake identity. She rented a storage unit where she stockpiled supplies, clothes for both of them, hair dye, fake glasses, enough cash to last months, maps of routes to Mexico. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy at home. She still slept beside Mark, still ate dinner across from him, still responded to his increasingly rare attempts at intimacy. Each day felt like walking through a minefield, one wrong step away from destruction. "I think we should try for another baby," Mark announced one October evening, pulling her into an unexpected embrace. Rebecca's skin crawled at his touch, but she forced herself to remain still. "Maybe we should wait a bit. After my promotion." "Always about work with you lately," he muttered, but let her go. 2 weeks before the planned escape, Rebecca made her boldest move yet. During a night shift, she accessed the personnel database and created a maintenance work order for November 19th. The transport vehicle would need servicing, requiring it to be left overnight with a spare key in the magnetic box underneath. Standard procedure for the morning mechanic. She also began her manipulation of Dr. Olson, carefully planting seeds of doubt about the reliability of certain test results, mentioning a news article about lab contamination at the county facility. When Dante developed severe abdominal pain on November 15th, courtesy of a carefully measured dose of ipecac Rebecca had smuggled to him, Olson was already primed to believe the blood test results Rebecca would later falsify. "Appendicitis indicators," Rebecca typed into Dante's medical file after Olson had gone home, her hand steady despite the magnitude of what she was doing. "Recommend observation for 72 hours. Dante was transferred to the medical wing that evening. The medical wing that, due to overcrowding, had temporary cells with older locks. Locks that Rebecca had learned to pick during long nights of practice on similar models she'd ordered online. November 19th arrived gray and cold, fitting weather for the death of Deputy Sheriff Rebecca Lawson and the birth of whoever she would become. She worked her regular night shift, every action precisely normal. At 2:47 a.m., she disabled the camera in the medical wing hallway by spraying it with a clear adhesive that would cloud the lens but look like natural condensation on review. Her hands didn't shake as she picked the lock to Dante's cell. They'd only trembled the first time, weeks ago in her garage. Now, the action was smooth, practiced. The lock clicked open in under 30 seconds. Dante stood waiting, dressed in the civilian clothes she'd smuggled in piece by piece. Jeans that looked like medical scrubs from a distance, a dark jacket that could pass for an orderly's uniform. "Ready?" she whispered. "Are you sure about this?" "Once we walk out that door, we're free," she finished. They moved through the facility like ghosts. Rebecca knew every camera angle, every motion sensor, every guard's routine. She'd walked this route 100 times in her mind, 50 times in reality during her shifts. They reached the transport bay without encountering anyone. The vehicle was there as planned, keys in the magnetic box. Rebecca had disabled the GPS tracker the day before during a routine inspection. They climbed in, Dante lying flat in the back, covered with a blanket. Rebecca drove toward the gate, her badge ready. "Late transport to county," she told the night gate guard, Jerry, keeping her voice bored. "Appendicitis case getting worse." Jerry barely glanced up from his magazine. Rough night to be driving. Supposed to storm. Tell me about it. The gate opened. They drove through. And just like that, they were out. Rebecca drove for exactly 12 minutes before pulling into an abandoned rest stop where she'd hidden the other car. They switched vehicles quickly, Dante taking the wheel of their escape car, while Rebecca changed out of her uniform and into civilian clothes. She threw her badge, her gun, her entire identity into a dumpster, watching 28 years of Rebecca Lawson disappear into garbage. "Where to?" Dante asked as she climbed into the passenger seat. "South," she said. "We have 6 hours before shift change, maybe 7 before they notice you're gone. We need to make distance." They drove in silence for the first hour, both afraid that speaking would somehow jinx their escape. The adrenaline kept them sharp, checking mirrors constantly, taking seemingly random turns to ensure they weren't followed. Finally, as they crossed the state line into Tennessee, Dante reached over and took her hand. "We did it," he said, wonder in his voice. "Not yet," Rebecca cautioned. "We're not safe yet." But she squeezed his hand back, feeling his warmth, his realness, without bars between them for the first time. The sensation was overwhelming. She'd dreamed of this moment for months, but the reality was both more ordinary and more extraordinary than she'd imagined. They stopped at a truck stop near Nashville as dawn broke. Rebecca had chosen it specifically. No cameras in the parking lot. Pay-in-cash policy. The kind of place where people minded their own business. She dyed her hair in the grimy bathroom, transforming from blonde to dark brunette. Dante shaved his head completely, the change dramatic enough that he looked like a different person. "How do I look?" he asked when they met back at the car. "Free," she said, and meant it. They ate breakfast at a diner attached to the truck stop, their first meal together as free people. It should have been romantic, momentous. Instead, they both picked at their food, too nervous to eat, jumping every time the door opened. "This is crazy," Dante said quietly. "We actually did it." "Don't jinx it," Rebecca warned, but she was smiling. Her phone, her real phone, not the burner she now carried, would be buzzing by now. Mark, waking up to find her gone, her shift supervisor realizing she hadn't checked out. The inevitable discovery of Dante's empty cell. She imagined the chaos, the manhunt that would follow. They'd check the cameras, find the clouded lens. They'd review the gate logs, see her late-night transport. The pieces would fall together quickly. "We need to dump this car soon," she said. "They'll connect it to the escape within hours." "Where's the next switch?" "Memphis. I've got another car waiting, registered to a completely different identity." "You really thought of everything." "I had 4 months to plan, and I had motivation." They looked at each other across the Formica table, and for a moment, the weight of what they'd done fell away. This was it. They were together, really together, with no bars, no cameras, no impossible circumstances keeping them apart. "I love you," Dante said, the words carrying more weight now that they were free to act on them. "I love you too," Rebecca replied. "Enough to throw away everything." Was it worth it? She thought about Mark, probably calling her phone repeatedly by now. About Sheriff Bradley, who'd trusted her, mentored her. About her parents, who'd be devastated when they learned what she'd done. About the career she'd built, the life she'd known, all ashes now. "Ask me when we're in Mexico," she said. They abandoned the first car in Memphis as planned, switching to an older model Honda that wouldn't draw attention. The news had broken by then. They heard it on the radio as they drove. Escaped from Willowbrook County Jail early this morning, Dante Rodriguez, serving 8 years for drug trafficking, is believed to have had inside help. Deputy Sheriff Rebecca Lawson is also missing and is considered a person of interest. Both should be considered armed and dangerous. Armed and dangerous. Rebecca laughed bitterly. I threw my gun in a dumpster. They always say that, Dante noted. Makes people more likely to call in tips. And the tips would come. Every gas station they stopped at, every motel they might check into, every interaction with another human being became a potential threat. They drove 16 hours straight, taking turns at the wheel, pushing toward the Mexican border. By nightfall, they were in Texas, exhausted but wired on adrenaline and gas station coffee. Rebecca had booked a motel room under her fake name, paying cash for 3 nights though they'd only stay 1. The room was dingy, water-stained ceiling and cigarette-burned bedspread, but it was theirs. They stood facing each other in the dim light of the single lamp, suddenly awkward. They'd declared their love through prison bars, planned a life together in whispered phone calls, but they'd never been alone in a room, never been able to touch without metal between them. This is strange, Rebecca admitted. We're strangers, Dante agreed. In a way. We know each other's souls, but not this. He gestured at the space between them, the bed that dominated the small room, the freedom to be together that now felt overwhelming. We can take it slow, Rebecca said, though every nerve in her body was screaming for his touch. We just committed multiple felonies together, Dante pointed out. I think we're past slow. He crossed the room in 2 steps, his hands cupping her face, and kissed her. It was nothing like Rebecca had imagined during all those lonely nights. It was better and worse, awkward and perfect, desperate and gentle. They were learning each other for the first time while feeling like they'd known each other forever. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Dante rested his forehead against hers. I can't believe you did this for me. For us, she corrected. I did it for us. They made love like fugitives, desperately, quietly, aware that the world outside was hunting them. But for those hours in that dingy motel room, they were just 2 people who had chosen each other over everything else. Later, lying in the dark with Dante's arm around her, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from the burner phone she'd given to her one ally. They know about Memphis, roadblocks on all routes south. Consider alternative. Rebecca showed it to Dante. We can't make it to Mexico. Not yet. Where then? She thought about their options, the contingency plans she'd made. West, Nevada, maybe. Lots of places to disappear in Las Vegas. Together. They left before dawn, taking back roads, avoiding main highways where roadblocks would be set. The radio continued to broadcast updates on their escape. Rebecca's photo was everywhere by now. The betrayed husband giving interviews, the shocked sheriff expressing disbelief, the community demanding justice. Deputy Sheriff Rebecca Lawson was someone we trusted, Sheriff Bradley said in a radio interview. She betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. We will find her, and she will face justice. Rebecca turned off the radio. That life, that person, was dead now. She had to believe that, had to become someone new entirely, or they'd never survive. As they drove toward the sunrise, toward an uncertain future, she reached over and took Dante's hand. No regrets? He asked. She thought about it honestly. Her old life seemed like a dream now, something that had happened to someone else. The woman who had put on that uniform every day, who had lain beside a man she didn't love, who had followed rules that were slowly killing her. That woman was gone. No regrets, she said, and meant it. But freedom is more complicated than just escaping. And as the miles stretched behind them and the desert opened up ahead, Rebecca began to understand that breaking out of prison was the easy part. Staying free, that would be the real challenge. Las Vegas was supposed to be their sanctuary. In a city built on illusions and false identities, two fugitives should have been able to disappear easily. But Rebecca quickly learned that freedom as a wanted criminal was its own kind of prison. They'd been in Vegas for 3 weeks, living in a weekly rental motel on the outskirts where nobody asked questions if you paid in cash. Rebecca had become Jane Mitchell, a blackjack dealer looking for work. Dante was Miguel Santos, a construction worker with papers that would pass casual inspection, but not much more. They were ghosts trying to build a life on foundations of sand. Have you ever been so paranoid that every siren makes your heart stop? Every knock at the door feels like the end? That was their existence now. Freedom, but at what cost? "We need to leave," Rebecca said one morning, staring at her laptop screen. She'd been checking news sites obsessively, using VPNs and public WIFI to avoid detection. "They've traced us to Nevada." Dante looked over her shoulder at the article. The FBI was now involved. Of course they were. She'd helped a federal prisoner escape. Their photographs were on the FBI's most wanted list. Rebecca's mother had given an interview, tearfully begging her to turn herself in. "Your mother," Dante said softly. "Don't," Rebecca warned. She couldn't think about her parents, about the shame and confusion they must be feeling. She'd written them a letter she could never send, explaining everything, apologizing for the pain she'd caused. It sat in her bag like a weight she carried everywhere. "Maybe we should separate," Dante suggested for the 3rd time that week. "They're looking for a couple." "If I go alone, no." Rebecca's response was immediate and fierce. "We didn't throw everything away just to be apart. We stay together." But staying together was getting harder. Money was running low. The cash she'd saved wouldn't last forever, and neither of them could get legitimate work. Rebecca had tried dealing cards at an off-the-books game, but the organizer had looked at her too long, too carefully. They'd left that night, changing motels again. "We could go to Canada," she suggested. "I have contacts there from before, people who might help." Cross another border. With our faces all over the news? He was right. They were trapped in a country that was hunting them, unable to leave, unable to stay still. The walls were closing in, just different walls than before. That night, lying in bed in their latest shabby motel, Dante asked the question she'd been dreading. "Do you regret it?" Rebecca considered lying, giving him the answer that would ease his guilt. But they'd built everything on truth, even if everything else was a lie. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Not you, never you. But I miss feeling safe. I miss not looking over my shoulder. I miss my mom." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "This is my fault. No, I made my choice. I'd make it again." She turned to face him in the darkness. "But I'm scared, Dante. I'm scared all the time." He pulled her close, and she could feel him trembling too. The strong, confident man she'd fallen for was just as terrified as she was. They were two people in love, drowning together in consequences they hadn't fully understood. The next morning changed everything. Rebecca had gone to get breakfast from a food truck, hood up despite the heat, sunglasses on. She was waiting for her order when she heard it. Definitely her. "I saw the news. Same height, same walk." 2 construction workers were staring at her, one already pulling out his phone. Rebecca's blood froze. She walked away slowly, forcing herself not to run, leaving the food behind. But she could hear footsteps following. She ducked into a casino, weaving through the crowds of tourists and gambling addicts, using the mirrors and chrome surfaces to track her pursuers. They were still following, now joined by casino security who'd been alerted. Rebecca's mind raced. She couldn't go back to the motel, couldn't lead them to Dante. She texted him from the burner phone. Burned. Run. Meet at backup. The backup was a storage unit they'd rented across town. Their last resort meeting place. Rebecca ditched her phone in a bathroom trash can and slipped out through an employee exit she'd noted weeks ago. Always know your exits. A habit from her law enforcement days that now served a different purpose. She stole a bicycle from outside a convenience store, another crime to add to her list, and rode hard for 40 minutes, taking alleys and back streets. When she finally reached the storage unit, Dante was already there with their go bags. "How?" she gasped, out of breath. "Maintenance guy recognized me at the motel. I saw him calling it in as I left." They looked at each other, the reality sinking in. They'd been made. Vegas was blown. They had maybe an hour before the area was swarming with agents. "Where now?" Dante asked. Rebecca pulled out a map, one of the old paper ones because digital left traces. East, small towns, rural areas. We can hide better there. "For how long?" She didn't answer because they both knew the truth. Not long enough. Not ever long enough. They drove through the night in a car they'd stolen from long-term airport parking, plates switched with another vehicle. Rebecca had become an expert criminal remarkably fast, necessity being a harsh teacher. They listened to the radio, hearing their own manhunt unfold. Considered armed and extremely dangerous, Rebecca Lawson is trained in law enforcement tactics and should not be approached. "Extremely dangerous," Rebecca laughed bitterly. "I haven't hurt anyone." "You hurt Mark," Dante pointed out gently. She fell silent. He was right. Mark had given an interview the previous week, talking about his devastation, his humiliation, the faithful husband whose wife had chosen a criminal over him. He was playing the victim perfectly, though Rebecca wondered if he'd even noticed she was unhappy before she disappeared. They settled, temporarily, in a small town in Utah. Population 2,000, the kind of place where strangers stood out but also where people minded their own business if you paid in cash and caused no trouble. They rented a cabin from an old woman who barely looked at their fake IDs, too eager for the money to ask questions. For 2 weeks, they played house. Dante cooked. He was surprisingly good at it, while Rebecca obsessively monitored news and law enforcement channels on a laptop she'd bought with cash. They hiked in the nearby mountains, always alert, always ready to run. At night, they held each other and pretended this could last. "Maybe they'll give up," Dante said one evening as they watched the sunset from their cabin's porch. "Eventually, we'll just be old news." Rebecca knew better. She'd been a cop. Some cases went cold, but escape cases, especially ones involving law enforcement corruption, those never went away. They'd hunt her until they found her, no matter how long it took. "Yeah," she lied, "maybe." It was the grocery store that did them in. Such a mundane ending to their run. Rebecca had gone to buy supplies wearing her disguise, dark wig, glasses, clothes that changed her silhouette. But she'd forgotten about her walk. Everyone has a distinctive gait, and Rebecca's, confident, measured, learned from years in uniform, was as identifying as a fingerprint to the right eyes. The right eyes belonged to a retired FBI agent buying milk. She knew the moment he recognized her. His body language shifted, subtle but unmistakable to someone with her training. He didn't approach, didn't confront. Smart. He'd call it in, let the professionals handle it. Rebecca abandoned the groceries and walked calmly to the car. She had maybe 15 minutes before they descended. She drove back to the cabin, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "We're blown," she told Dante the moment she walked in. They'd practiced this. Go bags ready, they were in the car in under 3 minutes. But as they pulled out, Rebecca saw the roadblock being set up at the main road out of town. They were too late. Back roads, Dante suggested. Rebecca was already turning, but she could hear the helicopters now. In a town this small, there were only so many roads. They'd block them all. Dante, she said quietly, we're not getting out of this. Don't say that. Listen to me. When they stop us, you need to say, I forced you. Say, I threatened your family, that I manipulated you. Stop. You can get a reduced sentence if you cooperate. Say you were a victim. Stop. His voice cracked. We're in this together. Whatever happens, we're together. The road ahead was blocked. 3 FBI vehicles, agents in tactical gear. Rebecca looked in the mirror. More vehicles behind them. To the sides, forest they could run into but not escape through. They were surrounded. I love you, she said. I love you too. Rebecca stopped the car and put her hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. Through the loudspeaker, familiar protocols she'd once been on the other side of. Exit the vehicle slowly, hands visible at all times. They looked at each other one last time as free people. Dante reached over, squeezed her hand briefly, then they opened their doors. The arrest was swift, professional. Rebecca didn't resist as they cuffed her. As they read her rights she could recite from memory. She watched them arrest Dante, saw him keep his eyes on her, even as they pushed him into a separate vehicle. Deputy Lawson, one of the agents said, his tone mixing disappointment with something like pity. You had such a promising career. That wasn't a life, she replied. It was just existence. The ride back was surreal. Sitting in the back of an FBI vehicle, watching the country scroll by through reinforced windows, Rebecca thought about choices. Every choice that had led to this moment. Taking the job she never wanted, marrying the man she didn't love, walking through Block C that first day, reaching through those bars to touch Dante's hand. She regretted none of it. Even now, facing certain prison time, she regretted none of it. 6 months of real life was worth more than 30 years of sleepwalking through a fake one. The trial was a sensation. Former Deputy Sheriff Rebecca Lawson, now defendant, sat in a courtroom she'd testified in dozens of times. Mark was there every day, playing the wronged husband for the cameras. Her parents sat in the back, her mother crying quietly, her father stone-faced. Sheriff Bradley took the stand, describing his sense of betrayal in terms that cut deep. But the prosecution's star witness was supposed to be Dante. They'd offered him a deal, testify against Rebecca, say she'd manipulated him and serve only 2 additional years. He'd refused. Mr. Rodriguez, the prosecutor pressed, isn't it true that Deputy Lawson used her position to coerce you? No, Dante said firmly, looking directly at Rebecca. I loved her. I still love her. Every choice we made together. His refusal to cooperate meant he'd serve his full original sentence plus additional time for the escape. But he held Rebecca's gaze as he said it, and she knew he meant every word. Rebecca took the stand in her own defense, not to deny her crimes, but to explain them. She talked about the emptiness of her marriage, the desperation of living a life that wasn't hers, the way Dante had made her feel alive for the first time in years. I betrayed my badge, she admitted. I betrayed the trust placed in me. But I couldn't betray myself anymore. I couldn't keep pretending to be someone I wasn't. The jury wasn't sympathetic. She was found guilty on all counts, aiding and abetting escape, bringing contraband into a correctional facility, destruction of government property, identity theft, and more. The sentence, 15 years in federal prison. As they led her away in shackles, she passed Dante being brought in for his own sentencing. They had seconds, just seconds, as they passed in the hallway. Their eyes met, and in that look was everything. Love, regret, defiance, sorrow. "Worth it?" he whispered. "Worth it," she confirmed. And she meant it, even facing 15 years, even having lost everything, she meant it. Because for 6 months she'd been truly alive. She'd loved and been loved. She'd chosen her own path, even if it led to a cell. The women's federal prison in California was nothing like the county jail she'd once worked in. Rebecca, now inmate number 78,432, learned to navigate a new world of unwritten rules and constant vigilance. She kept to herself mostly, using her law enforcement background to avoid trouble rather than court it. She wrote to Dante every week. The letters were screened, censored, sometimes lost, but she kept writing. He wrote back when he could, his letters the only light in her gray existence. They couldn't touch, couldn't speak, but their love persisted through carefully crafted words on prison stationery. 3 years into her sentence, she got unexpected news. Mark had finally filed for divorce, but more surprisingly, he'd included a letter. "I've been thinking a lot," he wrote, "about us, about what went wrong. I think I knew you weren't happy. I just didn't want to see it. I'm not saying what you did was right, but I understand why you felt trapped. I'm sorry for my part in that." It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was something. Rebecca wrote back, apologizing for the hurt she'd caused, wishing him well. He was remarried within a year, had the children he'd wanted. She was genuinely happy for him. Her mother visited monthly, the long drive from Georgia aging her more each time. They talked through reinforced glass, never about the escape, always about small things, the garden, the neighbors, the weather. Her father never came, couldn't forgive the shame she'd brought on the family. Rebecca understood. Some wounds don't heal. Year 5 brought a surprise. Dr. Olson visited, the first time anyone from Willowbrook had come. She looked older, tired, but her smile was genuine. "I figured it out, you know," Olson said. "After. The falsified medical records, the timing, I should have seen it." "Why didn't you turn me in?" Rebecca asked. Olson was quiet for a moment. "Maybe because I understood. I've been in a dead marriage for 15 years, never had the courage to leave. Watching you, it was wrong what you did, but it was also brave in a twisted way. Brave or stupid? Maybe both." They talked for an hour about nothing and everything. Before leaving, Olson slipped Rebecca a piece of paper. "Dante asked me to give you this if I ever saw you." It was a simple drawing, a sunrise over mountains, with words in Spanish at the bottom. "Cada amanecer te espero." Every sunrise, I wait for you. Rebecca served 12 years, released early for good behavior and overcrowding. Dante had been released 6 months earlier, his original sentence plus time for escape totaling 11.5 years. They'd planned this day through careful letters, coded messages that prison censors wouldn't catch. She walked out of a prison with a single bag, wearing clothes her mother had sent. Dante was waiting in an old pickup truck, grayer now, lined, face showing the hard years inside. But his eyes, those dark eyes that had started everything, they still held the same warmth. They didn't speak at first, just held each other in the parking lot while other released inmates streamed past. 12 years of separation, of letters and memories and dreams of this moment. "Hi," she finally whispered. "Hi," he replied, and they both laughed at the inadequacy of it. They drove to a small apartment Dante had rented in Sacramento. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. No bars, no guards, no cameras, just 2 people who'd paid an enormous price for the freedom to be together. That night, lying in bed without concrete walls around them, Rebecca asked, "Do you regret it?" Any of it? Dante was quiet for so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, I regret the pain we caused others. Your parents, Mark, even Sheriff Bradley. But us? Never. 12 years in prison was worth 6 months of really living with you. Rebecca thought about the life she would have had, still married to Mark, still working at the jail, still dying slowly inside. Then she thought about the last 18 years. The escape, the manhunt, the arrest, the trial, the long years of incarceration. The price had been enormous. I love you, she said. I love you too. They were in their 40s now, with criminal records that would follow them forever. They'd never have normal jobs, never travel freely, never escape the shadow of their choices. But they were together. Finally, truly, legally together. And for Rebecca Lawson, who now went by her mother's maiden name, Rebecca Santos, that was enough. She'd spent 18 years paying for 6 months of freedom, and she'd do it again. Because some prisons are made of concrete and steel, and others are made of loveless marriages and unfulfilled dreams. She'd escaped both, paid the price for both, and emerged on the other side scarred but not broken. In the morning, watching the sunrise from their tiny balcony, Dante took her hand. "What now?" he asked. "Now, we live," Rebecca answered. "Really live." And for the first time in either of their lives, they were truly free.